many Ghanaians. That's about the coronavirus, the monies government was able to raise, and how it's been spent. For many months, the finance minister has been on the block. Many people have been expecting him to account to Ghanaians how that money was expended. You remember last week, he went to Parliament seeking the approval of the House for at least $1 billion in the form of loans for government expenses. And the Speaker of Parliament said until the Finance Minister accounts to the House and Ghanaians in general, he was not going to see that through. So today, as advertised, the Finance Minister was in the House. This night's program is to help all of us, especially many of you who missed the proceedings on the floor of Parliament, to follow the debate. So what we are going to do is to play back excerpts of the presentations. And we are starting with Ken Ofori-Atta, who is today telling us that the amount of money government spent was around 12 billion cedis, contrary to the 19.3 billion we're made to believe, and the 17.7 thereabout, which the president talked about. So we won't talk much. Let's listen to Ken Ofori-Atta now.
2020 mid-year review and supplementary estimates, I present a comprehensive update on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures government have put in place to contain it. Furthermore, in the 2021 budget, government presented to this august House the budget statement and economic policy, including a detailed breakdown and justification for the COVID-19 expenditure, including a statement showing the sources of funds and expenditure on COVID-19, and this was duly approved by the House. Again, in November 2021, when I presented the 2022 budget, I provided further updates and schedules on COVID-19 expenditure. Mr. Speaker, I now proceed to provide additional details on the COVID-19 expenditure that I have listed. Support to households. Mr. Speaker, total amount programmed for the initiatives under the support to households in 2020 was 1.718 billion, out of which amount utilized was 1.55 billion. The details include a total amount of 12.1 million for the distribution of packed food in Accra, Temakasua, and Greater Kumasi. This includes the cost of transportation of packed food in some suburbs of Greater Kumasi by NADMO. The expenditure for the provision of hot meals during the lockdown served about 2.7 million persons for the period of the lockdown at a unit cost of 4 cedis 32 pesos. A total amount of 42.24 million was expended on distribution of dry food packages through faith-based organizations in Greater Accra and Kumasi. A total of about 470,000 persons received these food packages. As part of the support to households, Mr. Speaker, governments through the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and its agency, Ghana Water Company Limited, provided free water, which initially lasted for the period April to September 2020. Following an executive directive, this was extended to December 2020 for lifeline consumers. The distribution was also carried out by the Community Water and Sanitation Agency and other smallholder water supply organizations. An amount of 556 million was budgeted in 2020 for this program, out of which 456 million was utilized. In 2021, a total allocation of 200 million Ghana cedis was made for the provision of free water and electricity for lifeline consumers, out of which 143 million was utilized. Government also made provision in the budget for free electricity to lifeline consumers and absorbed 50% of all electricity bills for all residential and commercial customers. A total cost of 1.04 billion was utilized for the policy from April to September 2020. Mr. Speaker, the total amount programmed for the measures under the health response in 2020 was 1.522 billion, out of which an amount of 1.049 billion was utilized. The details are as follows. A total amount of 2 million cedis for busing health workers within Accra, Kumasi, and Kasua to and from work for the duration of the lockdown, and metro mass transport. The whole amount was utilized, with 0.7 million going to CAPTI, and 1.3 million going to support the services of the Metro Mass Transport Company. A total of 80 million Ghana cedis was programmed to pay 50% of the basic salary as allowance for frontline workers. All requests have been reconciled and paid. Total 1.44 billion was programmed for the provision of PPEs, testing kits, and medical equipment, as well as to undertake community engagements. Other expenditure includes communication, quarantine, and treatment for COVID-19. An amount of 1.01 billion was utilized. Health infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, in the wake of the pandemic, government took a bold decision to provide health infrastructure in the districts and regions that did not have a district or regional hospital. In all 111 district, regional, and mental hospitals, Agenda 111 were programmed for construction. A total of 600 million Ghana cedis was released to begin the construction across the country in 2020. In the 2021 budget, an amount of 779 million was programmed for the continuation of Agenda 111 projects. Out of this, an amount of 763.92 million has been released. Mr. Speaker, government programmed a total amount of 1.2 billion for security operations, evacuation of Ghanaians stranded abroad, and coordination of MMDA sanitation and disinfection exercises. As of 31st December 2020, amount of 875 million was utilized. This expenditure was utilized by the Ministries of Local Government and Rural Development, the Interior, Justice and Attorney General, Defense, National Security, and God. Mr. Speaker, in addition, measures to stabilize the economy after the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, government also implemented programs to revitalize the economy and protect jobs. These include the Coronavirus Alleviation Program Business Support Scheme, CAPBUZ, by the NBSSI, now the Ghana Enterprise Agency, which provided soft loans to 302,000 small and medium-scale businesses across the country to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic and protect jobs. A total of 600 million was utilized. The Ghana Cares Over Tampa program was launched in November 2020 to make strategic investments in the real sector of the economy. Total amount released as at the end of 2021 was 539 million Ghana cedis out of the total program amount of 1.5 billion cedis. And the establishment of the Development Bank of Ghana to address gaps in the Ghanaian credit markets, especially the availability of medium and long-term finance for the private sector. A total amount of 853 million has been transferred to the bank as seed capital. Mr. Speaker, other measures include the transfer of 1.5 million to the statutory funds in line with the approved budget to enable them to deliver on their mandate. This was occasioned by the non-performance of revenues largely due to the global lockdowns, and the payment of 1.267 billion to contractors to settle outstanding indebtedness to contractors that were programmed to be paid in 2020, with revenues collected, as well as ease the financial burden that arose due to the outbreak of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, due to the COVID-19 protocols, the Electoral Commission and National Identification Authority had to increase their registration sites and recruit more personnel to ensure compliance during the registration and voting. An amount of 401 million was transferred to the NIA and EC as additional support to ensure COVID-19 compliant registration and voting. National COVID-19 response to school reopening. Mr. Speaker, in September 2020, while other countries had closed all schools, government, with advice of experts, took the bold decision to partially reopen schools to enable final year students write their final exams under very strict COVID-19 protocols. This was largely successful, with minimal infections among the students. An amount of 1.119.73 billion was allocated for mass school reopening in January 2021. This was to ensure that all students and teachers were provided with infection prevention and control items, Total amount utilized was 1.118 billion.
So that was the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, on the floor of Parliament today. There's something that came up, and I've seen that trending on social media, whether what the House actually wanted were the total of the figures that represent the expenditure, or a breakdown of actually what was spent. If you look at paragraph 23 of the Finance Minister's presentation, and I want to quote, it says, all implementing entities, ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as the metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies that received funds for COVID-19 expenditure were required to keep the relevant documentation for audit purposes. And so that triggered the exciting debate on the floor of Parliament, because the accusation was that they were presenting conflicting figures from 19 to 17 to 12. And of course, if you look at the minister's presentation, he was even talking about programmed 19.3 billion cedis in 2020 from various entities, but they were able to raise about 18 billion, and out of the 18 billion, they expected to spend 15 billion, and out of the 15 billion, they spent 12 billion. So the argument was, why too many figures? Is it to confuse the public? Listen to Case Latoforson as we bring you tidbits of some of the arguments raised on the floor by both sides. First, the former Deputy Finance Minister, Case Latoforson.
He has said that so far, from 2020 to December 2021, he has spent 12 billion of that money. 12 billion. What he has failed to do is to tell us that between the 19.3 billion and the 12 billion, the difference of 7.3 billion, where the money is and what they have used the money for. So, Speaker, you have mobilized 19.3 billion from your own documents. So, Speaker, I make reference to the document. First, I'm making reference to page 4, table 1. Page 4, table 1. I receive it at the same time as you receive it. Page 4, table 1. Table 1 says that you have mobilized 19.3 billion sources of funding. Funding sources, 19.3 billion. That is what is there. So, Speaker, if you go further to the same document, page 6, item A, expenditure on COVID-19. It gives us utilization of, status of utilization of 2020 and 2021 COVID-19. So, Speaker, the last item, it gives you the amount they budgeted, the amount they have released so far, and he said that so far they have released 12 billion. So my argument is that if you've mobilized 19 billion and you've spent 12 billion, at least give us an indication. You received IMF 1 billion. You are telling us that you raised a bond of 10 billion. You're also telling us that you had some sources from World Bank. You've given us the numbers, but you have spent 12 billion. Give us an idea where the rest of the money is. The bond that you received, the IMF money that you received, where is the rest of that money? So, Speaker, I think it's a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question, and that is my second point. So, Speaker, Mr. Speaker, so the difference here that I am seeing is 7.3 billion Ghana cedis, unaccounted for, and I want to find out where is that money. It's legitimate. So, Speaker, my third point relates to the fact that our minister responsible for finance has given us an indication that he spent 12 billion Ghana cedis so far, 2020 and 2021. The Speaker, my concern has to do with the fact that, yes, he has given us some headline items. He said to us, and it is also in the media review of the year 2021, Government of Ghana's media review. And if you refer to page 101, appendix 4.3 of the media, 4E of the media review, the same thing has been stated here. Mr. Speaker, the minister had said, and let me commend him for the consistency in reporting. Mr. Speaker, page 101 of the media review. It's also in the same statement, appendix 1 of the media of the document that he's given to us. He said, Mr. Speaker, that they have spent 598 million at the time, from January to June 2021, 598 million, equivalent to $1 billion for the purposes of, $100 million US, for the purposes of payment for nose masks, hand sanitizers, and Veronica bucket. Mr. Speaker, my concern is, yes, you spend $598 million for nose masks, hand sanitizers, and Veronica bucket for the reopening of schools, but at what cost? We need the fine details, expenditure returns of that. We will need expenditure returns. Mr. Speaker, you went on in your own document. You said that you paid $36 million for the design of Agenda 111. For who? $36 million. For what purpose? Design of Agenda 111. Mr. Speaker, in the same document, he went on to say, page 100 of the media review, again stated here, and that's what I'm saying, I commend him for the consistency. Mr. Speaker, he says here that Agenda 111, January to December 2020, provision of health infrastructure, Agenda 111, district and regional hospital, 600 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, my question is, you spent 600 million for Ghana cedis for Agenda 111. Noble idea, but have they used the money? And at what time? I know the president cut the sword for Agenda 111 in 2021, but this money was spent in 2020. So, Speaker, I think it is fair for me to ask this question. So, Speaker, on that basis, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to invoke Article 103 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, that says the Parliament shall appoint standing committees or any other committee as may be necessary for the effective discharge of its function. So, Speaker, we cannot sit here and say that the Minister of Finance should be the only one accounting for the COVID amount. So, Speaker, the Minister responsible for Finance is only a conduit of releasing the money. But the monies were spent at the various MDAs. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to set up an ad hoc committee so that we can bring the various heads of the MDAs, in particular, that spent the money, to account for this in detail. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling on you, Mr. Speaker, to use the powers under the Constitution, Article 101, to set up 103 of the Constitution, to set up an ad hoc committee to particularly get the various covered entities that spent the money to account for it in detail. So, Speaker, yes, I've seen a bold attempt by giving us some headline items. I acknowledge that, but there are gaps. The gaps, I cannot ask the minister responsible for finance to give me the details of the fact that they spent $100 million on nose masks and hand sanitizers. I have to ask the minister who purchased that. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you that this committee must be established by this House, chaired by a member of the minority committee, so that we can go into the details to get the details out, and all of us will be able to get the facts as we need to. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
So, sounds exciting, isn't it? That's the debate on the floor of Parliament, which was opened by Kaisel Atoforsen, but the NPP MP for Okai Kwe Central, Patrick Buama, also made some exciting points. I won't waste your time. Just listen.
Our colleagues have been on the rampage. Trying to foul the atmosphere in this country with regards to the expenditures that the minister has ably presented to the House. Mr. Speaker, a summary of the expenditures are captured on pages 14 and 15 of the statement. Mr. Speaker, in March 2020, when the COVID-19 outbreak occurred, we all were very scared and did not have any clue about this pandemic. It took a responsible government to devise a very deliberate plan to protect us. Mr. Speaker, all the 275 members in this chamber are alive. We all benefited one way or the other from the relief that has been presented to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that our spouses were even privileged to come to the hospital or the clinic to get their jabs. Where were we going to get the monies from, Mr. Speaker? How many of us didn't benefit from the free water supply as captured in this report? How many of us didn't benefit from the free electricity. The lifeline consumers, the Minister of Energy is here. Our constituents, how many of you didn't benefit? Mr. Speaker, we are here for accountability. That is why the Minister on pages 14 and 15 has given us an elaborate expenditure plan, which cannot be criticized by your good self. You haven't been able to punch any meaningful hole in the expenditure as provided for by the Minister. We expected much from the minority. You've disappointed the people of this country. You've told them a lot that the government has concealed a lot of expenditures under this COVID-19 relief. To hear your ranking member or our ranking member on finance speak, rather commending a Minister of Finance, I doff my heart for the Minister of Finance for being honest and consistent, as stated by Honorable Antifos. Mr. Speaker, Agenda 111. The Minister said, and rightly so, that he set aside 600 million for this elaborate program. COVID-19 exposed Ghana's health system to the extent that most districts in this country did not have health facilities. What did a thinking government do? A thinking government decided that, look, let me take advantage of this pandemic and spread health infrastructure across the country. How do I start it? I have to make provision for in the budget. Fortunately for us, our colleagues and ourselves approved the budget and included that money. 700 million cedis was also added, making it 1.3 billion. Projects are ongoing across the districts. We as a country must look for additional funds to ensure that our brothers in Bumkurugu, Okankwe Central, and across the country have access to quality health care. Not my sister from Adan having a beautiful hospital in Adan. We all need Adan Hospital in Impoho. Mr. Speaker, it is heartwarming that this matter is being settled today, once and for all, and that a call for an ad hoc committee is an afterthought. To the extent that the Minister has spent time to give us a detailed expenditure, it is really uncalled for to waste the time of the Ghanaian. At the end of the day, the Auditor General will come back to this country with his report. And that committee is chaired by the Deputy Minority Leader, who is very knowledgeable in that space. Use your intellect to criticize the Auditor General's report and the report from the MMDAs, and we'll come and answer. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
And so that was Patrick Boama, the NPP MP for Okankwe Central. He raised a number of exciting points. Detailed expenses provided by the finance minister. I don't know whether you agree with him. He said that the minority was just crying foul and then raising the alarm over nothing. And most especially, they should wait for the Auditor General's report. We know the Parliament has been taxed through the Health and Finance Committees to investigate this. But the debate sounded even more exciting because there are others you want to hear as we continue this program. Isaac Adongo is the MP for Bolgatanga Central. I'm sure you've heard him severally. And he's the one who recently decided to tag the finance minister for his love for white apparels. Listen to him now.
Mr. Speaker, the issue about COVID-19 expenditure, come to listen to you, and its accountability is a major issue that hinges on the credibility of our country. We've spent a lot of monies that don't belong to us, but the magnanimity of a taxpayer sitting somewhere else, in billions of dollars. Mr. Speaker, as I look through the documents that have been served in this House by the same government and the same minister in the past, I'm struggling to understand whether this document is picking the data from somewhere else or the government's own data, which is copiously reported in its own budget statement for 2021. Mr. Speaker, the issue my colleague raised about the statement of the President to the effect that we spent 17.7 billion, it cannot be the case that today you are reporting that you spent 12 billion. How many months after the President spoke? As a matter of fact, we expect a better record to be showing that it is more than 17.7 billion. So right away, we become very confused that the numbers are now reversing backwards. From 17.7 to 12.2 or 12.0. Mr. Speaker, if we make a mistake and we call him tomorrow, it will be 9 billion. That is the problem. That is the problem. Mr. Speaker, one of my biggest difficulties is that this is a house of records. The minister appeared before this house and presented the 2021 budget statement and economic policy. In that document, the minister reported to us where he has received monies for COVID-19 and how much he has spent. Mr. Speaker, this is not my document. This is the Minister for Finance's own document, which is a record in this house. Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 274 of that statement of the budget, particularly under Appendix 12B, performance summary of funding sources, Mr. Speaker, all the sources that the minister raised the money, he reported the total at 19.3, which he has rightly reported in this report, except that he provided utilization that he had already done in each of the areas that he has listed. He actually even indicated how much of those utilizations are as a matter of loans to finance the deficit, and how much of it is our own money that doesn't go into the deficit. Mr. Speaker, the minister concluded that all the monies we borrowed that was utilized and not sitting in any bank account ended up at about 16.4 billion. He reported in that same document that when he now adds our own money, which in this case is the money he drew down on our contingency vote or contingency fund, the total amount is 18.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't look like 12 billion. In fact, that is 50% underreporting. From the minister's own document before this house, he is unable to speak to the same numbers a year after. That is very serious. Mr. Speaker, if I take the numbers the minister is reporting for 2021, that he spent 3.9, and I add it to the figure he gave me for 2020, Mr. Speaker, I get total expenditure on COVID of 22.1 billion, the minister's own report. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not reporting to us 10 billion Ghana cedis of our own money.
Why?
In his own report. This is not my report. This is the budget statement of the Minister for Finance,
And then
which is a public record in this house. And that after almost a year, 6 billion has disappeared, 10 billion has disappeared, and it is now a Koshoko 12 billion. Mr. Speaker, we must be very serious with this house. And we must be serious with the international community that gave us our money.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this is an affront to democracy. And I sit here and I can't even trust documents you give me because I don't know the lifespan of that document. In fact, 2 days later, that document will not be the same.
How much more the Bible?
How can I be relying on this type of data from the same source? Mr. Speaker, it is very, very serious. And Mr. Speaker, I've heard my colleagues try to say that because the Auditor General will bring us a report, we should not probe this. Mr. Speaker, our audit practice and reporting does not provide a room for special audit to be presented on COVID alone. The audit report will be reporting the totality of government finances and public finances. But then we have approved a special expenditure, we have gotten special funding, We are struggling to get to the bottom of that matter. That requires a special activity.
Absolutely.
And that our current arrangement of audit do not give us the opportunity to get what we want. And what we want is that we want to be sure whether it is 17.7 as reported by the President, whether it is 12 billion as reported by the Finance Minister today, or it is the 22 billion he reported to us last year. Mr. Speaker, this cannot be something that will require the Auditor General to give us an omnibus account. Mr. Speaker, to do justice to the people of Ghana, to reclaim the credibility of the political class in the utilization of our resources, there is an urgent need for Parliament to reclaim its integrity by making sure that we take steps to go to the bottom of these three conflicting numbers that are exposing the reporting of our country. Mr. Speaker, we have heard voice notes, we have heard audios that are going around of certain political candidates claiming that our COVID money was shared to them for elections. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious indictment on us. I am struggling to reconcile the numbers from the Minister for Finance in two different documents published by he himself and that of the President of the Republic. And I'm at pains to see how the Auditor General's report will resolve this matter. On this basis, Mr. Speaker, I would like to support the call that Parliament must take its destiny into its own hands and get to the bottom of this matter. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And so that is Isaac Adongo, the MP for Bolgatanga Central. Some key points there. He's asking how some amount of the total expenditure, where it is and what it was used for. Very shortly, we'll be speaking or be hearing Abena Osei Asare, the NPP MP for Etiwa East. I'm told she's also a deputy finance minister. We'll be hearing her shortly. But you see, when you listen to the debate and you are observing the body languages of the other MPs who are either observing or listening, you ask yourself, which of them is actually thinking Ghana or is being sincere as far as your expectation is concerned? These are the things I want to you to reflect on as we move into the next stage of our conversation. Abena tries to explain how some of the money was used. Exciting. Listen.
Mr. Speaker, if they had read paragraph 6 of the minister's statement, they would have realized that the minister said, yes, the total inflow for 2020 was 19.3 billion. And out of that, they used some to directly fund COVID-19 expenditures, and others were indirectly. One, on the expenditure side, we allocated 1.16 billion. And directly. And Mr. Speaker, the difference of 8.1 billion was what we used to shore up the budget. You remember we came to this house and revised the expenditure, revised the revenue numbers by close to 11.1 billion as a result of the effects of COVID. So the difference between the 11.1 and the 19.3 is what we used to shore up the budget. If you revise your revenue numbers down by 11.1 billion and you shore it up with a difference of 8.1 billion, clearly you've accounted for the 19.3 billion. And then I want to also go to page 5. I also want to go to page 7, paragraph 19. And it was quoted that the president said they had spent 8.1 billion on COVID-19 fund. When you come to page 6, clearly it is correct. You see it here that what we utilized, what we spent, what we utilized is actually 8.1 billion. So clearly, today the minister has put to rest the inconsistencies being said or yes, by our minority brothers and sisters. And today it is very clear that we have been consistent. Yes, it was 19.3 billion that came in. We have been able to account for the 19.3 billion. 8.1 billion was used directly for COVID-19 expenditure, and the difference was used to shore up the revenue numbers that dropped. Again, when you go to 2021, we put in the budget an expenditure of 4.6 billion for direct COVID-19 expenditures. And clearly, we've been able to account for the 3.9 billion that we utilized. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see the need why our colleagues on the other side are asking for a special audit in this. Clearly, the Auditor General at the end of the day will also look into this. This is what we have, and this is what I believe the Auditor General is also going to look at. One thing that I also want to point out that was out there was the specific inflows from the World Bank. Our colleagues on the other side also mentioned in various forums that this was not fully accounted for. Clearly, the $435 million that came from the World Bank has been accounted for on paragraph 11. When you look at it, it says that paragraph 11I, there was a fast-track amount of $35 million. And then when you go to paragraph 11II, it says there was another $65 million, which we have accounted for. And paragraph 11III, there's another $130 million that also came from the World Bank. And in paragraph 12, it says $200 million also came from the World Bank. This we have all accounted for. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that today we are putting the matter to rest. All the monies that came in 2020, the 19.3 billion, we have accounted for it through the table that has been provided here, where we have 8.1 billion being utilized, and then the difference is what we use to shore up the revenue numbers. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 was a rare thing. We had never seen this before, but yet still, this government thought it wise and saw that the most important thing to do was to save lives and also to protect lives and save the economy. So two things this government did. First was to, in the midst of the pandemic, was to save lives and protect livelihoods. And that is what we did in 2021, and we accounted for it. And then the second was to see how we can revitalize the economy after the negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why we also put in 4.6 billion, and then we have accounted for the 3.9 billion that we use. Mr. Speaker, with this, I believe that we have brought the matter to rest. Let's admit that you thought we couldn't account for it, and we have now accounted for it. Let's put it to rest and then move on. The Auditor General at the end of the day will also come and account for, will also go through the books and account for every money that we have spent on COVID-19, both directly and indirectly. So, Mr. Speaker, we thank you for this opportunity to tell the whole of Ghana that clearly these monies came in and this is how we have utilized it. So I believe that from today, let us admit that we erred in telling Ghanaians that we have squandered the money. Clearly, it is all clear here that we have the money, we have used it, we have utilized it for the benefit of Ghanaians, and that is why, by God's grace, we did not see what we saw in other countries. If we had sat down and done nothing, maybe the effect would have been bad. But thanks be to God that He gave us our president in the person of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and that is how come we are seeing the results we are seeing here. Let's admit it when it's right. When it's right, let us learn to admit it, that it is right. If it is wrong, we understand. But clearly, the way Ghana handled COVID, including its expenditures, is something that everybody can attest to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
It is Abena Osei Asare. She is the MP for Etiwa East. Now, she raises a number of issues. The question is, if you give 1,000 cedis to somebody to spend, and you ask the person for accountability, and he just comes to tell you that, yes, you gave me 1,000 cedis, so I'm announcing that I gave you 1,000 cedis. Is that accounting? Is that what you would do if Ghana is your business? Is that how it's supposed to be run? And she says that we should put the matter to rest because the money has been used judiciously. Now, we'll be going for a short break. When we come back, we'll be listening to Alexander Afenyo-Markin and Haruna Idrisu. Then we'll look at how the speaker concluded the issue. But Abena mentioned a number of figures, and I heard her mentioning, how do you call it, 19.3 billion, 19.3 billion, 19.3 billion. I want to quote specifically what the finance minister said in his presentation. He says, Mr. Speaker, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on businesses and households, ensure that economic activities recover and minimize job losses, government mobilized 18.19 billion out of the programmed 19.3 billion in 2020 from various funding sources. Mr. Speaker, for the years 2020-2021, the programmed expenditure amounted to 15.763.48 million cedis. That's billion. That's 15.763 billion cedis for the COVID-19 related expenditures, out of which the actual utilization was 12.1 billion cedis. I'm confused. We'll be taking a short break. When we come back, you will hear Alexander Afenyo-Markin and Harun Idrisu. Then we wrap up. If there is time, I'll pick a few calls.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. X Natural Mineral Water. Simply natural. Best Wine is your one-stop wholesale and retail outlet for all your original favorite brands of wine, liquor, champagne at unbeatable prices. You can get discounts of up to 15% off. We provide customized solutions for your events with our event planning and catering services. Buy your well-stocked hampers from us at great prices. Best Wine is also a major distributor of X Natural Mineral Water. Locate us at number 34 Ni Norte Nyanchi Street, Jowulu, or call 050-761-3900 for delivery or for more inquiries. Best Wine, caliber of wine and liquor at its best.
Welcome back. This is Ideas Exchange on TVXYZ. Remember, you can also call and speak to us if you want to be part of this program. And we are grateful to sponsors as we continue tonight's program, Ideas Exchange here on TVXYZ from our studios live. And you'd recall that when the COVID expenses and all the things that were happening around the globe were being monitored, the WHO, that's the World Health Organization, was very concerned about attempts by people to use COVID as a conduit to steal from the ordinary people. So even in UK, for example, this particular year in January 2022, the Treasury Secretary had to resign to the embarrassment of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We know in South Africa, for example, the Finance Minister had to also resign because of misapplication of COVID funds. So here in Ghana, this issue has come up, and there are strong arguments on both sides on whether it's appropriate at this time to look into what has been presented by the Finance Minister as adequate enough for this matter to be brought to rest. We will now listen to the MP for Efutu. He's the Deputy Majority Leader, Alexander Afenyo-Markin. He also makes some interesting points, and you will see in his presentation an attempt to indict the integrity of Kaisel Atoforsen, who is a former Deputy Minister of State.
Mr. Speaker, so many inconsistencies in the comments coming from one side, whereas the Honorable Atoforsen submits that the Honorable Minister of Finance must be commended for his consistency in reporting. His other colleague, Honorable Adongo, is on his own route, saying other things. Mr. Speaker, in my view, the minority as a group should have come with a consistent common ground to advocate a position so that Ghanaians would understand that. Mr. Speaker, I align with the finance minister and we are on the same position. Your side is inconsistent, whereas Honorable Atuforsen, who has been in government before, appreciates the fact that there has been consistency and is commending the finance minister. Others are taking the finance minister to the cleaners. These are comments, Mr. Speaker, that posterity is going to judge them on. These are comments that, Mr. Speaker, hands up forever will remember that, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atuforsen, in his comments, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atuforsen, Mr. Speaker, truth results in bravery. And the ranking member on finance has today, after all, Mr. Speaker, after all the attacks.
Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
I definitely defer to you because of your position. But so far, what you read yourself as the standing orders talks about comments on the statement made by the minister. Not statements made or comments made by other members. But I agree with you that in making your comments, you have to refer to earlier comments. But you have not made any comment of your own so far.
Mr. Speaker, you are well placed in the east. You are well placed in the east of this chamber to guide. And I take a cue. Mr. Speaker, suffice to state that before my own comment, I must commend him. And Mr. Speaker, if we don't compliment each other in this chamber will collapse. Mr. Speaker, our duty as Democrats in upholding this democracy is to compliment each other. And my respected colleague Atuforsen, Mr. Speaker, the ranking member.
He has elected to be truthful. He has elected to be truthful today. He has elected to be
former Deputy Finance Minister.
He has elected to be truthful today.
PhD, etc., etc. Today has subjected himself to fight. Mr. Speaker, having said that, my own comment. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Finance Minister, although he walks through the valley of the shadow of death, his faith has led him to fear no evil. And where the name of the Lord is invoked, trust that no danger shall ensue. And today, Mr. Speaker, I shall refer my colleagues as part of my comment to Order 151 and 152 of the rules of this House. We should not, in our desperate attempt to bring down a government policy, or in our desperate attempt to get power, to render the rules odious. These rules are there to guide all of us. We have committees in Parliament. If, Mr. Speaker, in the comment of Honorable Atuforsen, he contends that, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Atuforsen contends that he does acknowledge that indeed the Ministry of Finance did not do the specific expenditures. He does contend, and it's factual, and I commend him for that. If that is so, and we agree and believe same to be true, then let us rely on the committees of Parliament. We don't need a special committee. We don't need another committee. Mr. Speaker, are my friends going to be tolerant? I listen to them quietly. Nobody can say that during the lockdown we didn't serve hot meals. Nobody can say that during the lockdown Ghanaians did not receive nose masks. Nobody can say that Parliament of Ghana was denied what it needed to protect the 275 of us. Mr. Speaker, by the grace of God, through the intervention of this government, through the proactiveness of the finance minister, none of us lost his life. All 275 of us are intact. All of us are here. We took our job. We were protected. And Mr. Speaker, what more? Mr. Speaker, we are here to receive the facts. And when the facts are given us, we should at least be fair in acknowledging. But so far, I conclude by saying that the minority, putting all their comments together, say that they are.
And so that was Alexander Afenyumakin, the deputy majority leader. He mentions inconsistency, posterity with judges. He mentions hot meals, nose masks, and then of course. But I'm raising one serious issue. Do you think our MPs are taking us for granted, or they are serious about this, or even the finance minister thinks there's an issue? Because I saw him laughing, giggling, and just a debate for the sake of a debate. But don't forget, the committee that is supposed to dig further into this will bring this matter to rest. We'll wrap up with Harun Edrisu's comment.
This is what the Minister for Finance has to say. The establishment of the Development Bank Ghana to address gaps in the Ghanaian credit market, especially the availability of medium and long-term finance for the private sector. Then, Mr. Speaker, my emphasis. A total of 853 million. Few days ago, the President was reported in the Ghanaian media on this particular matter. Mr. Speaker, same Minister of Finance statement, the amount of money he received from the European Union, which was meant for the purpose of establishing the Development Bank, Mr. Speaker, in the Minister's statement, page 4, I quote, is 504 million. So you have spent 800 million on the establishment of Development Bank, when you are also accounting for the EU only giving you 504 million. Yet the people of Ghana are aware that the Development Bank was established with seed money from the EU money of 853 million. We need the fine detail. Here you are providing for 504 million in your table, table 1. Paragraph 9, whilst you are reporting 800 million, a discrepancy of almost 300 million Ghana cedis. And we want to know, even the Development Bank is now established, that is wholly established with statutory funds, even though we take note that this Parliament of Ghana was not given the opportunity to legislate on it, even with our sad experience of over 21 billion being spent on cleansing banks. You only needed Parliament to help you, to guide you in the establishment of new banks. We want reconciliation to it. Mr. Speaker, I'm also holding with me here message on the state of the nation by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, presented to this August House Wednesday, 30th May 2022 at Parliament House. And Mr. Speaker, I refer you to page 4, and I quote His Excellency the President. Mr. Speaker, in all, data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion or 4.6% of GDP has been spent in containing the pandemic since 2020. President of Ghana, 17.7 billion. Minister of Finance, 12 billion. Who should we believe? Who should we believe? The President or the Minister? 17 billion and 12 billion. Then, Mr. Speaker, who should we believe? Further, Mr. Speaker, the President also had this to say in the same page 4 of the State of the Nation address. It took an unbudgeted 1.9 billion to assure that our children and teaching staff went back to school. Mr. Speaker, President of Ghana, 1.9 billion. May I refer you to the Honorable Minister of Finance statement here, page 11, paragraph 36. The President says 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is reporting 1.119 billion. another discrepancy in page 36, and I read, an amount of 1,119,73 million was allocated for mass school reopening in January 2021. Yet the president says in his State of the Nation 1.9 billion, and you are giving us 1.1 billion. Another unexplained discrepancy. So, Mr. Speaker, for us, a probe and an open public inquiry into COVID expenditure beyond the headline numbers of the Minister of Finance is inevitable and an imperative. We are not looking for headline figures. I spent 12 billion. 12 billion on what? On what? We need the expenditure returns and expenditure details of every amount. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Atuforson also raises the fundamental issue of accountability of the COVID Trust Fund, which is established by an act of parliament. And Mr. Speaker, reason we are asking for accountability, we know that beyond public-spirited individuals who were determined to support the president to save lives, we are not questioning that he needed to save lives, but save lives in the arena of probity and accountability. In that COVID Trust Fund, Mr. Speaker, we are told that the National Health Insurance Authority contributed 250,000, Ghana Stock Exchange 100,000, GMPC 1 million, Ghana Gas 1 million, SNIT 500,000. These are all public funds that must be accounted for to the Parliament of Ghana. That is what we are demanding. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what makes the case for a public investigation, a public inquiry, whether it's ad hoc committee, it's a finance committee, it's a committee. We want an open public hearing on how COVID expenditure was done in the name of this republic. So, Mr. Speaker, I only can be commending you.
Unfortunately, our time is up. I'm sure you have enjoyed the debate, back and forth, strong arguments on both sides. But I like the tone of the minority leader as he wrapped up. Open public inquiry. That is what Ghanaians would want to know. And I believe that the international or the donor community would also be interested, because we got money from the IMF, $1 billion. We got money from the African Development Bank. We got money from the EU. And of course, several other institutions, minus the free COVID vaccines that were given to us, that we claim we have spent money on. And so there's going to be a lot of work. I'm wondering if this committee will be inviting all the MMDAs, that's Metropolitan, Municipal and District Assemblies across the country, to come and tell us how they spent their monies. Because at least we have a certain 2020 member of parliament for a political party, that's MPP, Sanarigu, who has made some revelations. Would she be invited? I'll leave it here. And so that's how we wrap up today's edition of Ideas Exchange. We'll bring you a repeat tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Join us again next week for another exciting edition. My name is Eric Ahianyu, and thanks to all the production team members. Good night.